welcome to the porch. Well, we're going to do a video this morning on the porch. I like to do them here. And we're going to do our subject is going to be wisdom. Now, wisdom has been taught on, preached on, discussed a million times, probably a lot more than that. And I've listened to people talk about wisdom for years. I've studied it for years. I've heard clinical psychologists talk about what they think wisdom is, doctors, preachers, religious people of all different walks of life, scientists. And here's the thing, everybody has a little bit of difference in what they think wisdom is, and I haven't found anything at this point that I thought was not legitimate. But we're going to talk about wisdom in a little bit different way this morning than the average thing. We're going to start out with a biblical verse, and the Bible says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom." So we're going to start there, and we're going to talk about something that, to me, when I first heard that, I thought, man, being afraid of the Lord is how you get smart or how you get wise. I didn't care much for that idea when I first read that or heard it. I don't remember whether I read it or heard it first. It's been so many years ago. But anyway, with that said, I didn't much like it. And the more I studied that and the more I understood the culture of that time and the way they described things, the more I understood that it wasn't a situation where you had to just sit around, shiver and shake and be scared of God, but it was more of a concept of reverencing God. But as I studied, it actually went a little bit farther than that for me. It was to understand that when we made decisions and we used wisdom, we needed to understand that our decisions would have consequences, meaning that was the fear or the reverence of the Lord, that ultimately for our decisions and what we do in life and the path we take, it's going to have consequences. And so there you have the reverence or fear of the Lord. That's what that's talking about. So let me tell a little story, because that's the way I do things. And the story is about people with a lot of knowledge and no wisdom. And I see that a lot these days. You see people that are very smart, degrees and all kinds of different things behind their name, and they still don't do very good in life because the wisdom's not there. They take the knowledge they have and they make decisions without wisdom, because they don't fear that there's consequences. Because they're smart, they figure too smart for consequences to come. Now, I know I'm kind of going around the bush here on this a little bit, but it is somewhat intentional. So when I think about that, I go back to the story I wanted to tell you guys. And this story was this. I was heading up a research and development team at a company, and I would end up getting people out of all the different departments of that company, and there was a lot of them. And the reason I did that is because I wanted all the different perspectives I could get when we were working on a project or anything like that, so that we had all the information we could gather on to make good decisions. Okay, having said that, I didn't always get the people on the team that I wanted on the team. Sometimes I got people that they could turn loose of at that present time. And I needed an engineer, and so they turned an engineer loose to me, or they loaned me one. And this guy was very, very knowledgeable, very educated in the engineering area. But the only problem with him was he was so smart that he couldn't get along with anybody. He considered himself smarter than anybody, so he didn't listen to anybody. And when he decided on something, that's the way he wanted to see it done. And if you didn't do it that way, he'd fight you uphill all the time. Well, on the project, we had determined we needed to do something a certain way, and this was a military project, so you got to cross the T's and dot the I's on those guys. And anyway, he didn't agree with something that we needed to do as we developed this project, and so he just dug his heels in. He wouldn't get us a drawing on it. Now, you have to understand, when you're doing military projects, you can't start on any part of it without the drawing that pertains to that part of it, okay? And we all could only see one way of doing this, and he didn't have an answer for it, but he just didn't want to do it that way. So he wouldn't provide us a drawing. So I called a meeting, and I got him and all the people in the room, but I also got the owner in the room, the guy that owned the company, because I knew that I was going to have to leverage his authority in order to get this guy to do what we asked him to do. Well, as we discussed it, I led us into the conversation, and we called him the old man, and that very affectionately was a dear friend of mine. He's passed now, but anyway, the old man finally sat there and listened to us, and he said, well, boys, he said, that's the only way to do that. He said, so just do it that way. I said, well, we just need so-and-so here to get us a drawing. He said, get them a drawing. Well, the guy agreed to get us a drawing. Now, he didn't fight with the old man because you didn't want to do that. That just wasn't a good move. He was one of the best old fellas you ever met in your life. But, boy, if you got him riled up or lit him up, he could be something to deal with. So, anyway, he agreed to get us a drawing. Well, we wasn't to that point on the build at the time, but we were closing in on it. Anyway, what I wanted to point out is, as we got closer, I tried several times to get him to produce that drawing, and every time I went to his office, he just put me off. And he was putting me off just out of sheer meanness. He had the ability to do that drawing rather quickly, but he just wasn't going to do it because he wanted to make me suffer, and he wanted to make the guys on the floor suffer. He had control. You couldn't build it without him producing a drawing, and so he felt he had control over the whole project because of that. He felt wrong, and I made sure that he understood that before this thing was over with. But anyway, I finally got to the point, I mean, we were about to start on that phase of the project. There we sat with no drawing, and from a military standpoint, we just simply could not do it without it. The rules were you had to have a drawing, so we had to have a drawing. So I go back up to his office. It was an upstairs office. And I asked him for it. He just started beating me around the bush and putting me off, telling me he didn't have time to do it. Now, I knew that drawing didn't take long to do it. I could have done the drawing, but I couldn't. As far as ability, I could have done the drawing, but we had to have a certified engineer to do it. So I couldn't do it from that perspective. Anyway, finally, after talking with him for a pretty good while, I just pretty much had enough of his nonsense. And I told him, I said, well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I said, I'm going to go down there and lay that crew off because they can't go any further without that drawing. And I said, then I'm going to go up to the old man's office, which was on the far side of the building, upstairs as well. And I said, I'm going to tell him I laid that whole crew off, sent them home because you wouldn't produce a drawing for that. And I didn't say any more. I just turned around and walked off. And I said it kind of like that. I was mad or angry, but I was just doing what I had to do. That was where I was at. Well, anyway, about halfway down the stairs, I hear a voice behind me, wait a minute, wait a minute. And I stopped and turned around, and he's standing there halfway up the stairs where I'm at, and he's got the drawing in his hand. Now, he had the drawing the whole time. He just wasn't going to give it to me because he wanted to be difficult. So there was a guy with a lot of knowledge, but no wisdom. See, there wasn't any wisdom in that at all. If you try to destroy a team project out of your own arrogance, there's no wisdom in that. Now, here's the fear of something. Now, it wasn't the fear of the Lord. It was the fear of the owner this time. I actually utilized that, and I was going to do just exactly what I told him I was going to do. But I utilized that. He knew if I went over there and lit that old fella up, that he'd be back over there in his office, and it was not going to be good. You know, said, old man, when he got angry, he just burned the house down. It was funny a lot of times. but he was a very emotional person, and he'd demonstrate that if you made him angry. Well, I was going to go over and make him angry on purpose because that was the only way I was going to get my drawing. So I said all that to make a point. The point was this guy had all the knowledge he needed to do what needed to be done, but he didn't have the wisdom to understand that he needed to work within the team respectfully and do what everybody decides. Sometimes you don't always get your way, and he didn't get his way. Of course, he didn't even have a way, didn't even have a solution, but we had one. But because he didn't come up with a solution, he wanted to resist the solution we had. Well, long and short, I got my drawing, got down and got the project back going again. But now I had a guy that I was having to work with that didn't have any wisdom. Now I did change that. I went ahead and got another engineer, one with some wisdom, an older engineer that had learned some things in life. And so I guess, in every story, there's a nugget of information. And if you guys will just bear with me, I'm going to go ahead and show you that nugget of information. And that nugget of information was this right here. Is if you want to understand whether you're operating in wisdom or not, it's pretty simple, I think. And here's the nugget. The nugget is just ask yourself this: when I make a decision, is it just for my own ego and my own purposes, or is it for the good of all? And if it's for yourself, you're probably making the wrong decision. You're probably not operating in wisdom. But if it's for and with other people, you probably are operating in wisdom. There's no biblical scripture that says there's safety in a multitude of counsel, and you need the counsel of others. That's wisdom, getting the counsel of others. And that's just one perspective on wisdom, and there's a lot of perspectives, and for the most part, most all of those are correct. But if you're not operating in wisdom, you're going to find yourself having a difficult life. You're going to find yourself making life difficult for everybody else too. So here's what I would urge you to do. I would urge you to just simply ask you a question when you go to make a decision. Am I making this solely for my own benefit, or am I considering the people around me? And if you're considering the people around you, there's a good chance you're operating in wisdom. So that's pretty much our inspirational talk for today. I'm going to go ahead and close this video up. We here at the Porch love you. We want the best for you in life. May God bless.